In the fog-shrouded streets of Victorian London's East End, where gas lamps flickered like dying stars and the air hung heavy with the stench of poverty, a shadow moved unseen. It struck without mercy, leaving behind a trail of mutilated bodies and a name that would echo through history: Jack the Ripper. For over a century, this elusive killer has haunted our collective imagination, a phantom whose crimes defied solution and whose identity remained a tantalizing enigma. But what if the veil of mystery is finally lifting? Tonight, we unravel the threads of one of true crime's most enduring puzzles, a story of terror, tragedy, and a breakthrough that might just close the case. Before we slip into tonight's tale, I want to take a moment to thank you, our listeners, for joining us in the shadows. If you're enjoying true crime sleep stories, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more ears and keep these chilling narratives alive. And if you'd like to dive deeper, become a Patreon member at patreon.com/Kelly Brink for ad-free episodes and exclusive bonus content that satisfies your true crime cravings. Thank you to our latest Patreon members, Jason, Jill, and Alicia. Your support means so much. Now, we're going to hear briefly from our sponsors before we dive into your uninterrupted story for tonight. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to True Crime Sleep Stories. Now settle in, dim the lights, and let the weight of the day fade away. Close your eyes if you dare, and allow the echoes of the past to wash over you. I'm going to tell you a story, one that begins in the grim underbelly of 1888 London, where desperation bred darkness and a killer's blade carved a legend into the annals of crime. The year was 1888, and London was a city of stark contrasts. The West End glittered with wealth and innovation, home to the elite of the British Empire. But in the East End, particularly the Whitechapel district, life was a relentless grind of poverty, overcrowding, and despair. Immigrants from Ireland and Eastern Europe flooded the area, fleeing pogroms and famine, only to find themselves crammed into squalid tenements. By 1888, Whitechapel's population had swelled to around 80,000, with 55% of children dying before age 5. Robbery, violence, and alcohol dependency were rampant, and for many women, prostitution was the only means of survival. The Metropolitan Police estimated 1,200 women worked as prostitutes in Whitechapel alone, often sleeping in common lodging houses for a few pence a night. It was into this cauldron of human misery that Jack the Ripper emerged, transforming the East End into a hunting ground. His crimes weren't just murders. They were spectacles of brutality that shocked a nation and exposed the festering wounds of Victorian society. The killer's victims were women on the margins, their lives marked by hardship, but each one a person with a story worth remembering, not just as footnotes in a killer's legacy, but as individuals whose tragedies highlight the era's inequalities. The first of the so-called canonical 5 victims was Ann Nichols, known as Polly. Born in 1845, Polly had once lived a stable life as a wife and mother of 5 children, but alcoholism shattered her marriage, leading her to the streets. By 1888, at age 43, she was eking out an existence through prostitution and odd jobs. On the night of August 31st, she was last seen alive around 2:30 a.m. on Whitechapel Road, telling a lodging house deputy she'd soon earn her DOS money. Her body was discovered about an hour later in Bucks Row by a cart driver named Charles Cross. Polly's throat had been slashed twice, nearly to the vertebrae, and her abdomen ripped open with deep, jagged wounds. The attack was swift and silent in a dimly lit street where screams might blend into the night's cacophony. Just over a week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman fell victim. Annie, 47, had endured a life of loss. Her husband died in 1886, and 2 of her 3 children had predeceased her. One daughter lived in France, the other in an institution. Struggling with illness and poverty, Annie turned to prostitution and hawking flowers. She was last seen alive around 5:30 a.m. outside 29 Hanbury Street, negotiating with a dark-haired man in a deerstalker hat. Her body was found in the backyard shortly after 6 a.m. Her throat was cut deeply, her abdomen opened, and her uterus, along with parts of her bladder and vagina, removed. Sections of her intestines were draped over her shoulders like a grotesque shawl. The mutilations suggested anatomical knowledge, fueling speculation about the killer's profession, perhaps a surgeon or butcher. The double event of September 30th escalated the terror. Elizabeth Stride, a 44-year-old Swedish immigrant, had arrived in London in 1866. She'd worked as a domestic servant and prostitute, surviving a shipwreck and losing her husband and children in the process. By 1888, she was living hand-to-mouth, cleaning rooms, and soliciting. Her body was found around 1 a.m. in Dutfield's yard off Burner Street. Her throat was slashed, but no further mutilations occurred, possibly because the killer was interrupted by a cart's arrival. Witnesses described seeing her with various men that night, but descriptions conflicted. Less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes, 46, was discovered in Mitre Square. Kate, as she was called, had a turbulent life marked by alcoholism and itinerancy. She'd lived with a partner, Thomas Conway, with whom she had 3 children, but they separated due to her drinking. Released from police custody for drunkenness earlier that evening, she was last seen around 1:35 a.m. with a fair-haired man. Her body was horrifically mutilated. Throat severed, abdomen ripped open, intestines over her shoulder, face slashed, eyelids cut, and her left kidney and uterus removed. A piece of her bloodied apron was found nearby in Goulston Street beneath anti-Semitic graffiti that read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Police Commissioner Charles Warren ordered it erased, fearing riots in the Jewish-heavy area. The final canonical victim was Mary Jane Kelly, murdered on November 9th. At 25, Mary was the youngest and perhaps the most enigmatic. Born in Ireland, she claimed a genteel upbringing, but had worked in high-end brothels in the West End before descending to Whitechapel. She lived in a single room at 13 Miller's Court with her partner, Joseph Barnett, until they argued with their landlord over her allowing other women to stay in their space. Last seen alive around 2 a.m., entering her room with a blotchy-faced man. Her body was found at 10:45 a.m., by her landlord's assistant. The scene was nightmarish, her face hacked beyond recognition, throat cut to the spine, abdomen emptied of organs which were placed around the room. Her heart was missing, ashes in the fireplace suggested the killer burned items to light his work, melting a kettle spout. These weren't isolated incidents. The Whitechapel murders file included 11 killings from 1888 to 1891, starting with Emma Elizabeth Smith in April 1888, who was assaulted and died from peritonitis, and Martha Tabram in August 1891, stabbed 39 times. Later victims like Alice Mackenzie and Frances Coles bore similarities but lacked the Ripper's signature mutilations. The canonical 5 are linked by deep throat slashes, abdominal eviscerations, and organ removal, often on weekends or month ends. Why do these crimes haunt us? Jack the Ripper was the first serial killer to ignite a global media frenzy. Tax reforms had made newspapers affordable, and literacy rates soared thanks to the Elementary Education Act of 1870. Sensational reports in papers like the Illustrated Police News sold over 1 million copies daily, blending fact with fiction. The murders exposed Victorian hypocrisy. The wealthy ignored the East End's squalor until blood spilled. They galvanized public outrage, leading to slum clearances and social reforms in the decades that followed. The police investigation was a Herculean effort hampered by Victorian limitations. The Metropolitan Police, under Commissioner Charles Warren, conducted house-to-house inquiries, interviewing over 2,000 people and detaining 80. Detectives like Frederick Aberline and Edmund Reed were dispatched, but forensic tools were non-existent. No fingerprints, no DNA. Crime scene photography was rudimentary and blood analysis impossible. The CID, reformed in 1878 after scandals, was understaffed and demoralized by internal squabbles. James Monroe resigned as CID head on the day of Nichols's murder. His successor, Robert Anderson, was on leave in Switzerland during 3 killings. Public pressure mounted. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, led by George Lusk, patrolled streets and offered rewards. But the killer taunted authorities with letters. The Dear Boss letter, received September 27th, promised to clip the lady's ears off and signed Jack the Ripper, the name that stuck. The Saucy Jackie postcard followed, referencing the double event. Most infamous was the From Hell letter to Lusk on October 16th, enclosing half a kidney preserved in ethanol, claiming the other half was eaten. Though many letters were hoaxes, possibly by journalists like Tom Bulling or Fred Best to boost circulation, these amplified the terror. Suspects were plentiful. Butchers and surgeons were eyed for their knife skills. Alibis cleared locals. Queen Victoria herself speculated a cattle boat crewman. Theories ranged from Prince Albert Victor to artist Walter Sickert, but police documents named 3. Montague Druitt, a barrister who drowned himself post-murders, Michael Ostrog, a Russian criminal, and Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jew with homicidal tendencies. For over 130 years, the case remained unsolved, a cornerstone of true crime history. It birthed Ripperology, inspiring books, films, and tours. The murder's brutality, the victim's vulnerability, and the killer's evasion symbolize the unknown horrors lurking in society. They remind us of progress in forensics and social welfare, yet the unsolved nature haunts because it underscores how evil can slip through cracks. But in 2014, a breakthrough emerged. author Russell Edwards acquired a shawl from Catherine Eddowes' crime scene, bought at an auction in 2007. Forensic analysis by Dr. Jari Luhalainen at Liverpool John Moores University extracted DNA from blood and semen stains. The blood matched descendants of Eddowes. The semen matched relatives of Aaron Kosminski. Kosminski, born in 1865 in Poland, fled genocide with his family to Whitechapel in the early 1880s. He worked as a barber, living near the murder sites. Police records describe him as insane, with solitary vices and hatred toward women. In 1889, he entered a workhouse, then called Colney Hatch Asylum, diagnosed with auditory hallucinations and paranoia. He refused food from others, fearing poison, and died in 1919 from gangrene. Why did he kill? Speculation points to mental illness, homicidal mania, or erotomania, as suggested by police surgeon Thomas Bond. Bond's early offender profile described a solitary man prone to periodic attacks of violence, possibly psoriasis. Kosminski's asylum records note threats with knives and a deep-seated misogyny, fitting the Ripper's targeted brutality against women. Yet doubts linger. The shawl's provenance is unverified. Sergeant Amos Simpson reportedly took it, but records contradict. Critics argue mitochondrial DNA matches are common in Ashkenazi Jewish populations, and contamination over 130 years is possible. A 2024 expression of concern in the Journal of Forensic Sciences questioned the study's replicability. Still, it's the strongest lead yet, offering closure while preserving the mystery that captivates. Jack the Ripper's legacy endures because it taps into primal fears, the unknown predator in our midst. In an era of solved cases via DNA, this Victorian enigma reminds us that some shadows never fully lift. The victims, Polly, Annie, Liz, Kate, Mary Jane, weren't just statistics. They were women fighting for survival in a merciless world. Their stories humanize the horror, urging us to remember the overlooked. As the fog of Whitechapel recedes, we're left with echoes of unanswered questions. Who was Jack the Ripper? Perhaps Aaron Kosminski, a tormented soul lost to madness. Or maybe the truth remains buried in history's graves. Either way, the Ripper's blade cut deep into our psyche and remains a wound that time hasn't healed. True Crime Sleep Stories is hosted and created by Kelly Brink, produced with the support of our dedicated team. Subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to help us keep telling these haunting tales. Visit patreon.com/KellyBrink for exclusive content and to join our community. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet you in the shadows next time. Until then, stay safe out there and lock your doors. Good night.